Hi, I'm Daniel Gold, and welcome to the Gold Standard Leadership Lab. By day, I'm a partner at a leading advisory firm where I draw upon my background as an attorney to help my clients succeed. This podcast, though, is my personal project, completely separate and apart from my day job, but reflects the same passion that I exhibit everywhere for teaching, mentoring, and helping others succeed through simple, impactful lessons. It is my hope that you'll walk away with practical takeaways to help you on your leadership journey. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me in the Leadership Lab. Let's get started. I sit in rooms with partners who built entire careers on knowing exactly how many hours something takes. If you ask them about an investigation, a complex matter that requires judgment at scale, they can tell you the phases, the timeline, the staffing model, right down to the very hour. And that knowledge, that skill, that expertise, that is their credential. It's what justifies their rates. It's what gets them the room in the first place. But what happens when you take that away? Technology today can now do some of the same work in a fraction of the time. At a level of polish that used to take a team days, weeks, maybe even months to produce. The hourly model that built their entire professional identity may start to collapse. And beneath the resistance to adopting technology beyond the talk of accuracy concerns, client trust, and risk management, I believe that there's something simpler at play. Because if the hours disappear, so does the thing they've spent decades becoming. If you strip away the time and materials or billable hours model for professional services teams across multiple industries, many very accomplished people may not know what to do next. And this is what I call the competence trap. And it's more dangerous than the confidence trap most leadership content talks about. Confidence is a feeling. Competence is a structure you built your entire professional life around. When that structure gets hollowed out by something faster and cheaper, you are at the risk of losing the credential that made the room open for you in the first place. The competence trap, though, existed long before generative artificial intelligence. It's the executive who spent 20 years becoming the person who always had the answer and can't tolerate a room where someone else's answer is better. It's the specialist who built a career on being the only one who understands a particular system and resists any change that would make that system understandable to everyone else. Competence, taken far enough, stops being a skill and has the very unique potential of actually becoming a hiding place. What something like Gen AI technology does is compress the timeline. It used to take a market shift about 10 years to expose how brittle a single skill identity really was. Now it takes less than 12 months. The professional services workers who feel the ground move under them are behaving irrationally. They're behaving exactly like anyone would when the thing that made them valuable starts to look optional. And so the inertia everyone in the industry keeps writing about isn't stubbornness, and it isn't resistance. I realized this problem years ago while building a practice from scratch. The people who fall into the competence trap aren't protecting quality. They're protecting the credential that made them feel like they had a right to be in the room. And the moment you're doing that, you've already lost the thing that made you actually valuable. In high-stakes contexts where validity matters and where right calls and wrong calls have real consequences, I have watched judgment get outsourced to systems, to processes, to whoever had the title that gave them authority to decide. And the results were predictable. People stopped thinking, executing, deferring instead. The moment the stakes rose higher than the system could handle, the entire structure begins to collapse. So recently, I developed a framework called Human as the KRINO, and it emerged from that observation. The framework I built is on a single principle. You, as the human being, stay in the judgment seat. Know what the tool or the process is designed to do and what instructions shaped it. Review the output as material requiring your independent judgment before it becomes a work product. Interrogate the methodology, challenge the results, run iterations, test alternative framings, and normalize the output against what you actually know about the facts, the circumstances, the stakes. Own that determination, own the work product, own the accountability. The acronym comes from the Greek word KRINO, which means to judge, to discern, to separate the valid from the invalid, because that's what judgment really is. It's the act of discernment, and discernment is the credential that never becomes optional. So I developed KRINO because KRINO doesn't care what tool is underneath. It works when you're evaluating output from generative AI systems, when you're overseeing work delegated to a team, like we talked about in episode 69, and when you're making decisions in domains that haven't changed yet but will. The framework is technology agnostic because it's not about the technology. Human as the KRINO framework is about staying in control of judgment itself. The reason why Human as the KRINO framework resonates with people across every vertical is simple. They recognize themselves. They recognize the moment when they realized they built a credential around knowing how to do one specific thing in one specific way. And they recognize the terror of watching that become optional. KRINO gives them a name for the thing that actually can't be automated, outsourced, or compressed by technology. It's the act of judgment itself. It's the discipline of staying curious, flexible, and rigorously in charge of what you decide. And this is empowerment, period, hard stop. It's not confidence. It's not technical mastery. Empowerment is the refusal to surrender judgment regardless of what changes around you. I believe that through my professional career arc, I have built value through something that is more portable than hourly expertise, let's say. And that is a thought leadership tentpole made up of speaking, writing, podcasting, and framing problems for people who are too close to see them clearly. That work has followed me into every industry I've entered because the underlying skill was never the subject matter. It was the ability to make complexity legible and hold the judgment seat about what mattered most. I've also trained for a marathon with that very strict rule in place. I refuse to let myself cross the finish line without already knowing what came after it. Not because the arrival is bad, but because I've watched what happens to people who fight with everything that they have to reach a single goal, only to discover there is nothing on the other side. A person I knew once fought hard to get a company to a sale, walked away with real money, and then had no idea what to do with himself next. The goal had been the entire identity, and when it ended, he didn't know what to do next. And that's the lesson underneath the competence trap. It's not enough to be excellent at one thing. You have to build the muscle of becoming something else before you're forced to. So if the thing that you are known for disappeared tomorrow, if the world simply stopped valuing the credential that got you into the room, what would you actually have left? I'm not talking about your title. I'm not talking about your rate. What judgment, what discernment, what way of seeing problems would still make you worth having you in the room? Because if the answer takes you a while to find, that's not a failure. That's the trap making itself visible and worth acting on today. The work now is building the answer before the market asks the question for you. The Human as the KRINO framework gives you the methodology. Stay curious, keep interrogating, normalize against what you know, own what you decide. The credential that survives every market shift is the one grounded in your refusal to outsource judgment itself. When information is abundant, real knowledge, real skills, and real expertise, they will in fact be the biggest differentiators. And I look at the long arc of a career through a very singular lens. What actually survives when you walk out of the room for the very last time? Nobody looks back at a life and praises someone for mastering a static skill and defending it for 40 years. The parts of a career that mattered are the moments you stayed in the judgment seat, became who the world needed you to be, and refused to let a system convince you that your job was just to execute. That's the version of yourself worth building. Everything else is just a temporary container for it. And remember, leadership isn't about perfection. It is about progress. So take this lesson, put it into action, and continue setting the gold standard in your own life and at work. I'll see you all next time.